So, Taylor Damiani gave a talk about, based on a talk, basically, that she shared, is where I learned this. When we sing and we dance, we use the practice. It's like when we used to have a blockage because of the shame from my family. So, and the discouragement, the mocking, and yet the last few years of really working on these difficult exposure places, I'm finally able to sing and dance, not in a performance, outsider geared kind of way, but totally just from the inside. It's been amazing to catch myself singing in the shower, while I pray, while I move around the house, and I'm finally able to dance in front of others without focusing on them. And it may seem small to someone else, but it took years of doing these kind of like internal touchdowns in new territory, unlearning and developing. And then in terms of my therapy, I had some homework, like what do these non-emotionally charged flashback memories of where I'm transported to various places I've been the last however many years, what does it mean to me? Basically, like, what do they mean to me? So the memories, I thought about it, and I had homework for the next session. The memories were basically unprocessed moments where I was releasing the interactions that felt forced or made me uncomfortable. I would walk or eventually bike to new places I hadn't been, sing a new block I hadn't been to make new connections, to expand my world that felt too small or rigid or without choice or without any room for me as I am, or where I wanted a new life, where I wanted to immerse myself in someone else's experience, like a different version of myself. And I want to share a few from a couple of Jewish sources, some teachings, and then also from a biologist. Her name is Dr. Aimee Apigian. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe, who's the founder of Chabad, where he verbringed, or like he gathered with the Hasidim, his followers, the ones that were the Chabad Hasidish Holy Gathering, Hasidic. The founder of Hasidism was the Baal Shem Tov, and then the one who took over him was the Maggid, who was the Maggid of Mizrich, of Dover. So from Yisrael Baal Shem Tov to the Mizrich Maggid, and then to Menachem Mendel Vitebsk, who went to Israel and had the Alter Rebbe stay and eventually moved to Lubavitch in Europe, and he was a teacher of the Alter Rebbe. So he verbringed with the Hasidish, this special type of Hasidism of Chabad, the Holy Gathering, learning, philosophy, stories, refreshments, singing, and l'chaim. That's kind of like a verbringing. With these Hasidim, the devout ones, pious ones, on Yotes Kislev, which was the day commemorating his freedom from jail, because the Chabad opposers told authorities he was giving money to the enemy as a traitor, because Israel was under Turkey at that time in 1798. And the second thing was the Baal Shem Tov's Yahrzeit, the day of his anniversary of his death, in 1772. So, and he said about himself, like me, a Beinani, in the context of a tzaddik Beinani Russia, the dominant factor of goodliness, godliness on the one side, and the dominant factor of badness, non-oneness on the other side. And then there's the Beinani, which is everyone in the middle doing the work of good over bad, kind of. And so the Chassid, Rabbi Mordechai of Lipli, said, Rabbi, I'm also not a Rasha. And the Alter Rebbe replied two versions. One, he said, within Beinani there are many levels, 500 levels, Beinani being the middle, and then a Beinani is in the entire world. And then from Rabbi Moshe Klein, he wrote an essay. It said, it used to be difficult to voice one's opinion outside of one's inner circle, yet over the last 20 years, social media and message boards emerged, and anyone with internet access and a device can now comment for the masses, to see and influence public opinion. The problem is that not everyone is the expert they think they are. There exists something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a cognitive bias in which people believe they're smarter than they are. Essentially, low-ability people don't possess the skills needed to recognize their own incompetence. The combination of poor self-awareness and low cognitive ability leads them to overestimate their abilities, combined with access to speak publicly, and this effect has reached all-time records. So that was an interesting follow-up. I wanted to share, going back to this, the Alter Rebbe, what I shared earlier about from the founder of Chabad, we would say the source is Ramach Osiyos, chapter 187. Okay. And now I want to share from the biologist, Dr. Aimee Apigian. She talks about the, I guess it sounds like a pigeon, the biology of trauma healing and how early life regulation. So we have 0 to 6 months, the nervous system. If you're in a 0 to 6 months nervous system, it's like they like being non-emotional. If somebody got a biological trauma in the 0 to 6 months nervous system, they like being non-emotional. They feel shame about needing anything from anyone. They prefer to be in their heads and think than to feel. We might call this intellectualization, the creating distance from others and mistake this for boundaries, withdrawing with anything uncomfortable, seldom aware that they're out of touch with their bodies, and fear of both being alone and overwhelmed by others. If the biological trauma healing is from the 18 to 48 months nervous system, they're good at faking intimacy. They feel helpless, weak, dependent, and they have a fear of failure and a need to become so strong and successful. Yet difficulty expressing I need your help. Needing help makes the person feel vulnerable to being, and makes a person, this is their state of being, to being used, needing help making a person feel vulnerable to being used, controlled, overpowered, and manipulated. And building a sense of safety is tummy work, basically trying to scooch forward on your tummy. It's a felt sense, and also laying there and feeling the sensations. It's called titrating if necessary, when you have to like pause and have less intense experience. We also have to figure out how to move forward while keeping the belly button on the ground. So there's the sense of being on the tummy and healing the experience by being like the way a baby would. Neurodevelopment and attachment. So neurodevelopment is movement, patterns, reflexes. Think of neurons move. And then the relationship and connection is attunement and capacity in biology. So there's neurodevelopment and attachment are dependent on neurodevelopment, and relationship and connection and biology. So there's a kind of a culmination of, from all of this, you have the degree of internal regulation, depending on the person's biology, their relationships and connections, and their own personal neurodevelopment. When we look at adaptations of the biology when it's 0 to 6 months, we see that breathing patterns could be shallow or frozen. The energy could be what we might call global high activation. It's almost like general anxiety. Symptoms and conditions could be anything from migraines, colic, asthma, IBS, ADD, ADHD, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, scoliosis, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, sensitivity, environmental sensitivities, and allergies. When it's adaptations of biology, when it's 6 to 18 months, it would be a breathing pattern, which is difficulty breathing in. Energy is generally low, and the symptoms and conditions are anxiety, depression, digestive issues, infections, autoimmune, abdominal emptiness, chronic fatigue, cancer, personality, autoimmune personality, give until they cannot anymore, then the body falls apart, and having a disease diagnosis is really helpful to excuse himself from having to take care of others. Could be pyroluria and high oxidative stress. There's 3 types of attachment. We mentioned attachment. Regulation, which is open and connecting. Remember we talked earlier about how regulation, the degree of internal regulation is based on relationship connection, your attunement and capacity, biology, and neurodevelopment. So here we have regulation, where you could be open and connecting. 2 is holding on tight. This we might call dysregulation or an adaptation. Or 3, letting go, which is also a dysregulation or adaptation. In the big picture of neurodevelopment, we have adaptation. We have neurodevelopment leading to adaptation, leading to the biology of trauma. So adaptation is attachment style, and the biology of trauma is a cellular level. So neurodevelopment, like the patterns and the movements, result in how you consistently show up, which results in your cells becoming affected. And we'd say this is our capacity for stress, grief, or change. And this is the change between neurodevelopment to adaptation to biology of trauma. And this is our health, our ability to, our capacity for any stress or change or grief. And you'll see this in behaviors, habits, decisions, even your career. She also talks about something called heart shocks, which are unexpected and cause an immediate trauma response in the body. Its impact can be hard to complete, can severely disrupt the child's ability to trust and feel safe, which we might call a form of attachment trauma. And the trauma being anything that for any reason at that time caused an experience of overwhelm of the body, whereas where attachment So here we defined attachment. Let's define trauma. We defined trauma. Let's define attachment, which is a baby's survival degree of internal regulation of the nervous system, becomes the basis for neuroception, which is perception of nervous system. It's not perception of reality, it's perception through the nervous system. So attachment is when the baby has developed a imprint on their nervous system, in other words, a basis for perceiving. It sets the tone of the nervous system for life through auto-development. It's basically automating the system. Early life heart shocks could be separation, physical injury, birth trauma, medical procedures, maternal depression, in utero exposure and injury. And adaptations to an early life heart shock could be everything from cellular level, tissue. Well, cellular level would be energy conservation, because each cell has power system. Then you have tissue level, which is you might have more tension, like increased tension, like bracing, a lack of tone. System level would be digestive system or immune dysregulation. Emotional behavioral level would be guarding, don't care syndrome. Reactivity patterns is something like what we call kind of global high intensity activation, like a generalized state. And neuroception, which is the constant sense of, like, basically neuroception is our perception through the nervous system, right? It's not a perception of reality. We just define that. So it's this constant, the neuroception level would be constant sense of danger, constant sense of inadequacy, and neuroception in early life from a heart shock would be a biology of trauma which perpetuates cues of danger to the neuroception, which is wired now for, it becomes wired for stress and overwhelm. It creates the most challenging types of grief, which is when it comes to attachments and absence. And finally, a heart shock is that part wanted, in other words, she says, well, how would you define it? It says the part wants to die. It's not, it doesn't want to live like the way it is. So you might see this coming up in the nervous system by self-sabotage, which with therapists, it's like, do you really want to get better? Or chronic functional freeze, which is like a bodily heaviness, sort of what we might often end up calling depression. And this idea that this part needs a hero, and actually we can be that hero now. Part of the healing is we are the hero for ourselves. And so one, we stay present, be present as long as needed, just be there. It's not about fixing, it's about being present. Two, the part will stay stuck as long as it feels all alone. So three, we have empathy and authority. I'm going to stop with that and wish you all the best. And I will be recording another video shortly just to get ahead on the week, because I don't like having to wait till Friday. I don't like having to do at the end of the week like doubles for Friday, because it's more important really to prepare for the Sabbath, for Shabbos. Okay.